Okay, guys, we're back for another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest. We're back following Brian Norman Jr.'s huge win against Sasaki. Stopped him in the 5th round. You know, Brian Norman Jr.'s operating at the world level in welterweight at the moment. I think he's now the WBO welterweight world champion, or has been, and successfully defended his title. Brian Norman's a guy, like I said, at the top of the welterweight division. Been about for a minute. Actually, considering he's still so young, he's only 24, and he's showing it. He's doing it old school, really. He's doing it old school, where he's 24. He turned pro quite young, and he's been getting his experience as a pro, which, you know, is sort of the way it has been done in the past before. I think it feels like the modern era. We had a lot more amateur pedigree coming in as a standard. Whereas before that, though, it wasn't uncommon for guys to turn pro at 18, 19 and have, you know, 20, 30 fights by the time they're 25, 26, 27, right? Whereas now you're getting guys turning pro at 24, 25. And then by the time they're 30, now they've got, you know, 20 or so fights under their belts, but they're 30 now. So Brian Norman's doing it a bit of an old school method. Perfect record, 28 wins, 22 knockouts. His last 2 fights have been won by knockout. Earlier this year for Derek Cuevas, stopped him in the 3rd round via TKO. But this fight against Sasaki, he knocked Sasaki out cold. And from the first punch he was throwing, he was mollywopping this guy, this poor man around the ring. And Sasaki is a top 10 welterweight contender in the ring rankings. Sasaki's clearly no joke. You know, he's ranked, I think, number 7 at the time of this fight. So that really shows his level as well. And Brian Norman Jr. mollywopped this dude. Sasaki, to be fair to him, showed moments. He showed that he was definitely a live body in there. He wasn't coming in there to get steamrolled, but Brian Norman Jr. is just that much better than him, and he did exactly that, just steamrolled him, right? So a really good performance for Brian Norman Jr. Continues that undefeated record at 28-0. Yeah, WBO world champion. You know, if I'm Brian Norman, the logical next fight, it's obvious. Everyone knows what it is. Yeah, put it in the comments below. You all know what the next fight is. Or the next logical fight. Maybe not the next fight, but the next logical fight is a unification bout with Jaron Ennis. That's a huge fight. That is a gigantic fight. You've got 2 unbeaten welterweights, world champions, and both known for their power. They're brilliant boxers in their own right. I think because Brian Norman really steamrolled Sasaki, whereas Jaron Ennis, he'll stop guys, but he'll style on them too. Right? Jaron Ennis can do it both. That's probably why he would beat Brian Norman, but still, we don't know that. That's a huge fight for the welterweight division. Probably the biggest fight in the welterweight division since Spence and Crawford. They are that next generation of welterweight. Obviously, Jaron Ennis already beat Stanionis as well. Brian Norman's the only guy really left for him at that weight division that could really challenge him. I know there's other contenders, but I think Jaron Ennis is just so far above those guys. Like, we almost don't even count them. Obviously, you do count them, obviously. But Brian Norman's got to be next for Jaron Ennis. If that fight ever gets made, hopefully it does. I'll do a breakdown. But a great performance from Brian Norman against Sasaki. And he's put himself right in those conversations at the top of the division. I don't think... He probably would fight a Stanionis if that fight was offered to him. Brian Norman probably would take that fight because Brian Norman's a fighter and he, you know, comes to fight and gets guys out of there. But if I was Brian Norman's manager, I want that Jaron Ennis fight. That Boots Ennis fight is money. A huge payday, probably the biggest payday that Brian Norman will get, I'd imagine. But yeah, another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag. Let me know what you thought of the Brian Norman fight. Was you surprised? Did you think, you know, it was a good knockout? It was a very good knockout. It was out cold. But yeah, what do you think of Brian Norman Jr. as a boxer, and what do you think's next for him as well in the welterweight division? Do you think he gets that Boots fight, or is it a Stanionis fight next? Yeah, let me know. And that's it from me. Another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.